All right. So we'll let people keep joining in, and we'll just start. Uh, Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Caitlin. I am one of two advisors for the Reading, Advising, and Mentoring program. We're glad to have you here today with us, and thank you for joining. Before we begin, I do want to mention that this meeting will be recorded, and we will put this recording on YouTube, hopefully by the end of the day, and that'll be available for you all to watch later on. Uh, Now we will begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land each of us live, learn, and thrive on are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded homelands of Indigenous and tribal nations. Cal Poly Pomona is on the homelands of the Gabrielino Tongva tribal nations. We acknowledge the genocide and systems of oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous people of their lands, and we honor and respect the diverse and beautiful people still connected to this land today. So before our speaker begins, we would like to share the purpose of this event. Every fall and spring semester, RAMP invites an individual who comes from a similar background to our participants to present at our professional spotlight event. These individuals share their stories, including obstacles they've overcome, perseverance tips, and advice for participants who are interested in the speaker's career field. We strive to have various professions and backgrounds represented to allow all students the opportunity to gain insight on how to navigate college and prepare for potential careers. And we hope through this event you leave feeling motivated to pursue new ideas and seek out new opportunities and relationships that will help you succeed at Cal Poly Pomona and beyond. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker and my former coworker, Jun Im. Jun is a marketing coordinator at Kimley-Horn, which is one of the nation's largest engineering, planning, and environmental consulting firms. He supports the firm's engineers and planners to bid on public sector projects and to develop strategies pertaining to new markets and disciplines. He values instilling a sense of belonging in the teams he works with and mentoring younger professionals. Jun is a first-generation US citizen, and he received his bachelor's degree in film studies, film and media studies, and a minor in political science from the University of California, Irvine, where he also served as an editor at the campus newspaper for 3 years. After graduating, he spent 5 years in the background screening industry before entering the architectural, engineering, and construction, or also known as AEC industry, which he has been in now for over 4 years. So now I will hand it over to Jun to share a little bit more about himself, his journey, and how he got into his current line of work.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, RAMP, for hosting this event and inviting me to be today's professional spotlight. Presenting and speaking to groups of people is not one of my fortes, so I apologize in advance for stuttering. So I will go ahead and share my screen. So to start, I wasn't born here. I was born in Incheon, a port city in South Korea's northwest region. If you ever get to visit the country, particularly Seoul, Incheon is where you'll most likely fly into. I don't have any memories of Korea or early memories of Korea, and that's because my family moved to Hong Kong in 1992 after my dad's company relocated him to their office there. This was while the city was under British rule. While my memories of Hong Kong are very spotty, I do remember attending an international school, and my teacher was Canadian. My family lived in Hong Kong for nearly 3 years before my dad's company then decided to relocate him to their office in Garden Grove, California. He moved here first to settle in and get things set up for myself, my mom, my younger brother. And while he was here, the three of us lived back in Incheon with my paternal grandparents for several months. We moved to the city of Fullerton on a visa in October of 1995. My parents enrolled me in a local elementary school to start kindergarten. Because I didn't know English, I got in trouble for being a little too rowdy on occasion. And I didn't need to be fluent in English to know that I was in trouble and also felt bad for it. While I was learning English at school, my parents also arranged for an after school tutor to teach me English at home. It took me about a full year to finally be comfortable speaking, reading, and understanding this new language. But as far as my parents were concerned, I wasn't done with Korean yet. While I did use it at home to converse with them, and we were always around other Koreans, especially at church or through Korean enclaves here in Orange County or Los Angeles, they enrolled me in Korean classes, which took place on Saturday mornings. I didn't like it, of course, because who wants to give up their Saturday mornings? But I attended for several years from elementary school to junior high. In August of 2000, after we had been in this country for about 5 years, our family received our green cards. But just 1 month later, my dad's company informed him that they were transferring him back to Korea, which would essentially mean we would have to move back. My dad didn't want that, obviously, because it was his and my mom's intention for us to live here and for us to go through the American education system. And so he protested that decision and took it up with the company's executive management, but they refused to budge. Uh, Luckily, he held firm too, and uh, that eventually did result in his termination anyway, just 2 months after our family had received our green cards. He was unemployed for nearly half a year before he found new employment here in the States. But the important thing is we got to stay. Because my family immigrated here when I was very young, I think that helped me assimilate into American daily life with some ease. There were, of course, some things I didn't fully grasp, such as music, because I would grow up listening to whatever CDs and music that my parents listened to, while my classmates were listening to things that were more recent in culture, so to speak. But generally speaking, I got along well with other kids, and I made new friends every year, and stayed friends with them. I also did fairly well in school, thanks in part to multiple after-school learning programs that my parents enrolled me in. I would say I was generally happy during those early years. The only times when I was reminded not to take anything for granted was whenever my parents fought, which was always around the topic of money. My parents together had made the decision for my mom to be a stay-at-home mom, and that would leave my dad as the breadwinner of the family. While I wouldn't go so far to say that we were struggling to be fed or anything, I always carried around this knowledge that uh, as far for my family, money was tight. That said, I hated it whenever they fought, I but luckily this would only occur once or twice a year. The jump from elementary school to junior high school was, I think, the first difficult transition that I went through. Uh, Unbeknownst to me, my parents were already looking years ahead and wanted me to enroll in a high school that had an international baccalaureate program. This is also commonly known as IB. A bunch of high schools, especially in California, do have this program still. And because they had this plan in mind for me, I had to attend a very specific junior high school that had a track record of churning out students who got into those programs. We moved the summer after I graduated from the sixth grade to be within that school's boundary. And naturally, this meant that most of my friends ended up attending another junior high school. Uh, that wasn't fun. And while I did eventually make friends at this new school of mine, it took me time. Uh, Contrasting it with some of my peers who came into this junior high school with a lot of their friend groups still intact and attending that same school. I also had to put more effort into my classes and studies to get the grades that I wanted. Eventually, after uh, as eighth grade started to come to an end, I had to take the entrance exams for this to get into the IB programs. I didn't pass one, which eliminated one option, but I did pass the other. So Sunny Hills High School was where I was headed. High school was a pretty tough time, and as I'm sure all of you can relate. My grades mattered even more now, with college applications looming just a few years away. And this meant that virtually everything that myself and my peers did was geared toward getting into a good college, from whether it be our performance in our classes to pursuing leadership roles in clubs to community service and taking SAT classes early on. My friends and I would later talk about how being an IB was like being in the trenches. And while that is an excessive comparison to make, we were essentially riding this 4 year storm together. Admittedly, I didn't do so hot grades wise, mostly earning B's with a handful of A's and a couple of C's. During this time, I was still trying to figure out what I was supposed to pursue in terms of a career. In my junior year, the idea of the film industry sounded pretty attractive. So when college applications did roll around, I applied to a bunch of schools with the programs, in addition to a few others where I applied to be in the humanities since I consistently did well in my English and history classes. When college decision letters arrived, most of my top choices out the window. The choice that I had came down to Chapman University and UC Irvine. Both were good schools, but after visiting both campuses, UC Irvine made more of an impression on both me and my dad. So I entered UCI as a humanities undeclared major. College is great compared to everything else that came before it. I enjoyed the autonomy that I had over my schedule. And I also came in with sophomore standing thanks to the credits I got from my AP and IB test scores, helping me register, and that in turn helped me register for classes I wanted quickly. At this time I found that I enjoyed writing movie reviews, and I found an outlet for that on campus through my college newspaper called the New University, New U for short, where I quickly got involved. This gave me more clarity about what I wanted to do after college, which was screenwriting. So during my sophomore year, I became a film and media studies major. This major ended up being much more than I had expected, as I ended up studying all types of visual media. I enjoyed my classes, whether they be about techniques such as my screenwriting and adaptation classes, or theory like my monstrosity in Asian cinema class, which a lot of my classmates and I were arguably duped into taking because we thought the title of the course meant that we were watching Asian monster movies. They were horror movies. Um, so during my junior year, I was lucky to land an internship at Royce Multimedia, a media company based in Irvine and very close to UCI. Around the time when I joined, the company was developing a TV series about a local motorcycle enthusiast, and this culminated in us shooting footage for a sizzle reel. It was my first time experiencing the professional side of production, and I enjoy witnessing and helping out with it. I mentioned that I started writing for the New U in my freshman year, and this newspaper became what I poured most of my heart and soul into during college. After becoming a staff writer, I decided to apply for the associate entertainment editor position for the editorial board that following year, and to my surprise, I was chosen. And as intimidating as it was to being among mostly older, smarter, and infinitely more talented writers and people who knew what they were doing, I kept my head down and learned as much as I could, from editing articles using the Associated Press style to laying out a newspaper using Adobe InDesign. Eventually, intimidation gave way to comfort, and I felt like I had found my niche. People whom I enjoyed being around, who were willing to impart whatever knowledge they had to me and share their passions with me. I was never bothered by the fact that I was giving up my Sundays so that we could put together that week's issue. I also pushed myself to go outside of my comfort zone of movie reviews by taking on restaurant reviews and features pieces. I felt for the first time that UCI was where I belonged and that there was a path in front of me that I was excited to continue down. I then spent my junior year at the publication as its entertainment editor, and in this role, I enjoyed having more responsibilities like training new editors, assigning stories, providing feedback to my writers, and helping them develop their writing skills, and getting my fellow students to read the newspaper, which was a difficult task considering just how our readership was never really high to begin with. This led me to run for the editor in chief position during our elections for my senior year, something that I would have never envisioned myself doing when I first entered college. While I did lose that race, I was chosen as to be the managing editor for the next editorial board. I came into my new role with a lot of confidence as I had spent 2 years observing what the previous managing editors did, and I had a lot of ideas for us. We found our staff at the editorial board, made our presence better known on campus, and built relationships with university administration officials, student leaders, and various campus groups and organizations. Our efforts that year culminated in Measure U, a student referendum asking for a quarterly 99-cent fee from all undergraduates to fund the new U's printing costs for the next 5 years. The odds were against us, as 25% of the student population had to vote, and 60% of those votes had to be yes votes. And we knew that this was going to be a near impossible task because at the time, UCI was known for having a very apathetic campus. But we managed, we did it. We Measure U passed, and that ended up being easily our biggest accomplishment that year. Yet at the same time, the managing editor position was a humbling experience from the very start. My editor in chief, who was actually a year before me, felt that I was making a lot of big decisions early on without her input. And as a result, people were treating me as the leader of the newspaper instead of her. So I obviously didn't want that. So I made a conscious effort to support her, keep her informed, and make sure that she was growing in confidence in her role. Our editorial board also went through its fair share of drama. Midway through the year, one of our editors left, and just a few months later, another one of my editors wanted to leave before she changed her mind. Another editor, of course, still a good friend of mine, told me and my editor in chief to our faces that she had lost faith in us as leaders, and she was not the only one to feel that way. At one point, a significant portion of our editorial board opposed the decision that we made to reprint an article, which led to a heated Teams conversation in our newsroom, lasting over 3 hours and resulting in an uneasy truce after we cleared some miscommunication and got everyone on the same page. We also angered the university administration and a couple prominent student groups over our reporting. While it was nearly tradition for every editorial board to go through these types of issues, it was difficult. It was different to experience it in a leadership capacity, and it taught me that despite having good intentions or despite even my best intentions, a lot of things are just outside of my control. My senior year came to an end earlier than most, as I had finished all of my classes and accrued enough credits to graduate a quarter early. As bittersweet as it was for me to say goodbye to my home for the last 4 years, I was also proud of what I had accomplished, and I was very optimistic about my future. That said, post-grad life was a struggle. I spent that summer searching for jobs, applying for jobs, and never hearing back from jobs. I applied for positions in the film industry and in journalism, only to never hear back. I was frustrated because I thought that I had gained good transferable skills from my time at the NUU and also during my internship, but none of it really seemed to stick. Finally, after 3 months, I landed an internship with a company called Go 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 Entertainment, led by an independent filmmaker whom my church pastor knew. While the position was unpaid, I knew that it was standard in the industry, and I was just happy to have gotten something. The filmmaker was about to release a feature film in theaters, and my main tasks included distributing marketing materials, maintaining a production account book, and crafting press releases and e-cards. As I found out on my first day, working in the industry was incredibly demanding and draining both physically and mentally. Throw in the fact that I was going to sleep late and waking up early so I could head out to Los Angeles, I just wasn't in a good headspace. After 1 week, I was wondering what I'd gotten myself into. While I did get to do some cool things like coordinating the movie's Los Angeles premiere and meeting the cast of the movie, I was constantly stressed out. Finally, I made the decision to turn in my notice after 1 month. In all, I left in 6 weeks. The fact that I had failed made the second round of employment feel even heavier. And to make things worse, because I had graduated a quarter early from college, I was supposed to start paying off my student loans starting that September, when I had no means of doing so. I deferred payments for 6 months and then expanded my job hunt to areas outside of my interest just because I was desperate to land a job. The only times when I found respite from my negativity was whenever I spent time with my church group, who were always quick to remind me of my work. A break came nearly 10 months after I graduated. A friend of mine was working at an employment screening company, and she told me they were hiring temp workers. At that point, none of my prospects had gone anywhere, so I decided to take up this opportunity since I really needed to start paying off my student loans on my own. Um, while I know my dad, while I know that my dad would have been willing to help me start paying it off, I didn't want that option, and thus began my journey at Accurate Background. Accurate and other employment screening companies run various background checks for their clients' job candidates, making sure that they meet their potential employee screening criteria before having their job offer finalized. In my role as a criminal research specialist, I was retrieving criminal record information from county courts, initially in the state of Ohio. As I got more comfortable and proficient at running these searches, I was then trained to run background checks in other states as well, as in addition to the National Sex Offender Registry. I would read through online dockets and case copies to pull information about dispositions, sentencing details, warrant statuses, and upcoming court dates, all of which would go into the initial background screening report. After less than a month, I became a full-time employee. After about a year and a half in that role, I applied for an open position in the adjudication team and got it. In this new role, my duties centered around essentially the tail end of the employment screening program, as I performed quality reviews of background screening reports and made hiring decisions based on our clients' screening criteria. Following 2 years in that adjudication specialist role, the company sent out a notice about an open position for a proposal writer. While I didn't quite understand what proposals entail, I knew the role involved writing, which I had a background in and wanted to do. I applied for it, and after several rounds of interviews, was offered the job. My new role meant that I was taken out of the background screening process and placed way ahead before all that. Companies that seek an employment screening firm will release requests for proposals, RFPs, requests for information, RFIs, and requests for quotations, RFQs. Interested firms respond to these requests by providing information that these companies want to know, such as an overview of our employment screening process, the accuracy of our reports, what similar profile clients we serve, and of course, our fees. As a proposal writer, I help the sales team by crafting our responses, strategizing interviews with prospective clients, and consulting subject matter experts across the firm to develop material that could be used in our responses. I enjoyed this line of work as I got to see processes I didn't know about, like the applicant tracking system, implementation, and integration, uh, learn proposal writing fundamentals like how to set ourselves apart from our competition, and got to meet a ton of people whom I probably would never have met otherwise. And as interesting as the employment screening industry was, and as much as I liked my coworkers, I knew I didn't want to be in this industry forever. After almost a year and a half of being a proposal writer, I started looking for proposal writing opportunities elsewhere. Soon after, in spring of 2019, I accepted an offer for a proposal coordinator position at Packard Engineering, a small engineering firm located in Santa Ana. As this was going on, I was waiting to be naturalized as an American citizen, having started that process almost a year earlier. My brother and I had both applied at the same time and got interviewed at the same time, and he had already gotten naturalized. Finally, in March of 2019, I received an update from USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services, that I had been denied. Back when my brother and I had been interviewed, the agents processing our cases had asked for the same information, proof that our dad worked or had intended to work for his then employer on or after he received his green card back in 2000. We both submitted his W-2 from that year that we found, but while my brother's agent accepted the evidence and cleared him for naturalization, my agent denied it because apparently the W-2 does not confirm that he worked at his previous company after the date he got his green card. I had 30 days to appeal the decision, and if I didn't, it was final. One of my church friends connected me with another church member who was an immigration lawyer. After the lawyer reviewed my decision letter, he explained that my situation could become much worse. Specifically, because of the timeline for my dad's job situation back in 2000 that resulted in his termination, USCIS could potentially investigate our family for green card fraud. In a worst case scenario, this could lead to not only my parents and I losing our green cards and being deported, but even my brother could be could be denaturalized. This at the time, this, according to the lawyer, was something that was happening regularly under the Trump administration. One of my church friends, or this came as a complete shock to my family as we had immigrated here legally, built our lives here for nearly 25 years, and we're of good moral character. But as we found out, none of that could potentially matter. The lawyer told us we had to appeal as there was just too much at stake. After this call, I saw my dad have a nervous breakdown for the first time in my life. I was miserable for weeks, and I became bitter upon seeing my friends live out their lives normally while I was wrestling with the possibility of being deported. Um, my family and I hired a lawyer, and with his guidance, my dad was able to acquire an employment certificate from his former employer, as well as an old CD containing accounting records that included pay stubs for pay periods after he got his green card. Thanks to the new evidence we had, plus representation by the lawyer, I was called in for another USCIS interview in July, but this time with the senior agent. We made our case, and the agent at the time just said that he needed to check just one thing in my dad's records. After we left the interview, my lawyers told me he was feeling confident. Me, not so much, because I had a hope for the best, expect for the worst attitude. 2 days later, I got a notification stating my naturalization application was approved. I was sworn in as an American citizen in August of 2019, 17 months after the initial application. As rewarding as this result was, it was also poignant, especially given the turmoil that my family had gone through. By the time I got my citizenship, I was 4 months into my new role at Packard. There were challenges in adjusting to a new industry, this time being the AEC industry, but I was settling in well. While I was still crafting proposals, they were much more technical in nature, as we were bidding mostly on government projects and contracts that required civil and structural engineering. While agencies do seek information like our firm's profile and our qualifications, they also want very specific information, like a description of our understanding of the project, a description of our approach to said project, and a task-by-task summary of what services we will provide for the project. I was constantly learning new terms, acronyms, and the like. Being at Packard forced me to see the world differently in that after a few months, I could never look at a road or a bridge the same way again. My responsibilities also went beyond proposal development. I had to make sure that our engineering staff's resumes were up to date. I also had to create and maintain descriptions of our firm's projects. There were a ton. Since we were a minority-owned small business, we are certified as such by several agencies, and I was put in charge of making sure these certifications didn't expire. I also wrote and posted announcements and news posts on our website and social media pages. I spent almost 3.5 years at Packrim, and my duties eventually became more geared toward business development, which involved attending conferences and outreach events, as well as connecting with other firms in the AEC industry. Working at a small business meant I got to wear a lot of hats as I would help with administrative, legal, and recruitment efforts. By this point, I wanted to experience something new, but before I did that, I needed an extended break. So I turned in my notice, worked the remainder of my time there, and went on a 2-month long trip to Korea. Being in Korea was just what I needed. Not only could I relax completely without worrying about any work-related responsibilities, it was a great time for me to connect with my extended family, as I had only seen them 4 times since my family had immigrated here. And when I eventually got to go that year, that was my first time back in almost 13 years. While I was there, Kimley-Horn came calling in the form of a recruiter who asked me if I would be interested in a marketing role. I said I was, and I figured that at the very least I could just get some interview experience out of it. Several weeks after a call I had with that recruiter, I had a virtual interview with members of the marketing team. Just days after I returned home from my trip, I had a second interview at the firm's office in Orange. Not even 2 weeks later, I accepted an offer. When I first left for Korea, I thought that I wouldn't get a job for about 6 months. Turns out it took less than 4. I've been at Kimley-Horn as a marketing coordinator for over a year now. And while I did arrive with industry experience and some familiarity with what we do, those merely served as the foundation, which has since been built on by our culture and our way of doing things. When I was first interviewed by the firm, I spoke about how I desired to grow into a leadership role and to be a mentor to young professionals. While I did have supervisors and bosses throughout my career, I felt that I had never had a mentor who took an active interest in my professional development, who wanted to know what I sought, and put me in positions to achieve those things. And what I never had, I wanted to give to those who came after me. Because for people like me who come from a humanities background, who go into non-technical fields, I strongly believe that we would benefit from having a mentor figure. For the first time in my professional career, I have not just a mentor, but a whole team that is looking out for me, helping me build relationships with engineers and decision makers across the region, advancing my knowledge of what our firm and people do, positioning me to experience and accomplish my goals, and encouraging me to pave my own path. And I think that for the first time in my life, I feel content with my professional career. I look back at all that I've gone through, and I can't help but notice that my life didn't really pan out according to the plans that I had. That it's been shaped not so much by my accomplishments as much as it has been by my failures and my struggles. But because my life, but just because my life didn't turn out the way that 12-year-old, 18-year-old, or even 22-year-old June wanted, that didn't mean the end of all. That didn't mean that there were no opportunities at all. Sometimes these opportunities presented themselves. Sometimes I sought them. Sometimes I knew what they were, and sometimes I didn't. But they were there, and by taking them, in the end, I turned out okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, June. I think just a round of applause first, using our little emojis here. All right. We're going to actually now move into Q&A. So for any of you that are interested in asking June a question, you can feel free to do so in the chat, or you can also turn on your mic and ask the question as well. I think maybe to get us started, I'll ask a question first. I know that you mentioned that you've worked in like different kinds of marketing, right? From like entertainment and now to more like technical marketing, where it's like technical writing for a specific industry. Um, Maybe like what are the connections or even what are the biggest differences between those two fields?
Yeah, I think the biggest differences definitely do come down to the environment. Obviously, with it moving between these industries, there are they each have their own terminologies. They also have their own, um, if you want to call it, their own workflows, um, and 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 with it also come different sets of expectations, so to speak, whether it be whether they be from a client end or just within within a employer's end. In terms of similarities, I do think that any type of marketing that I did was always centered around trying to trying to convince our audience. In entertainment, when I was working at Go Go Go, our chief objective was to make sure that people was to entice people to go out and see our movie in theaters, and to at least, or at the very least, just to kind of check it out and find out more about it, and maybe even spread the word. In in the employment screening industry, when I was at Accurate Background, it was a matter of convincing these prospective clients that we were the best firm to do their employment screening based on our experience, um, our, based on the processes that we had, based on our accuracy rates, things like that. And I think from there, because I came from proposal writing and proposal development roles from both the employment screening industry and the AEC industry, um, the general gist of what I did, which was to also convince uh, public sector and private sector clients to hire our firm to carry out to basically provide these services. It really just all comes down to convincing, and I think that's what links all these various marketing roles that I've been in together.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions? Again, you can add them to the chat if you'd like.
June, you mentioned that you
Yes.
felt like you didn't really have mentorship during
Mhm.
your professional time. What kind of mentorship did you have during college? And was any of that mentoring happening outside of your time in the newspaper, with the newspaper?
A lot of the mentorship that I had actually came while I was at the newspaper because when I first joined the editorial board, I had these senior editors that most of whom had already spent a year at the paper and knew the ins and outs and also knew how we should go about doing things. And these were the people that I came to rely on. And these were and while I was initially intimidated by them, they did go on to be people that I look up to, people that I learned from, and especially later on when I was in that managing editor role in my senior year, I could also look back at the people who had been in my positions as well as the previous editor in chiefs and ask them for advice and also share with them the news of like, this is what's going on. How would you approach this? What do you think about this? And I think that's where a lot of my mentorship came from. Even though we're no longer in college and not a lot of us are in journalism, these are still people that I look up to, and these are people that I can look to get uh, various kinds of advice, whether it be professional or personal. And I'm just grateful to have had those people in my life.
Thank you. I feel like what I'm hearing you say is that by being involved, you essentially receive some mentorship. So, we don't want to go through college just going to class and going home, doing our homework, but it sounds like, we gain so much from our involvement, even though you probably didn't realize that you would be receiving that mentorship. And I imagine you provided some mentorship to others as they were coming in, in your role as one of the editors.
Yes, absolutely. So by the time my senior year came around as a managing editor, um, a lot of the editorial board that we had hired were first-time editors who had only seen us who had only observed us work in the newsroom and only with like maybe a couple of articles under their belt. Um, and by the time my time came around, I was basically doing the same things that that my mentors were doing previously. And that was actually the part about being a managing editor that I enjoyed the most, where I wanted to be this mentor figure. I wanted to be there for my staff, and also just uh, telling them that I can be an outlet for not only it didn't have to be just issues at the newspaper. They could also come to me for advice about anything going on with their classes or their personal lives and things like that. So I think that's what provided the roots for my desire to continue to be a mentor now.
Thank you so much, June. Definitely going to let you all know that before you leave, please fill out our evaluation form. And we're still opening up the floor for questions too.
I
I might
haven't,
have another.
I'll say
Oh,
I
me
have
too,
another,
Laura.
I want to give other people a chance first.
Yeah, me too. I do have another one as well.
Mhm.
You can ask yours first, Laura.
Oh, okay. What was a challenge that you faced during your 4 years at UCI, that really stands out to you, that you can reflect on now and see it as something that you were able to learn from? Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, that you over.
Yeah. Yes. I would say that was. Uh, I keep going back to my. I keep going back to my time at the New Year, specifically in my final year there. But I remember, uh, as I mentioned before, as I had mentioned previously, I talked about how going into that role, like I was full of confidence. I thought I knew what it is that I thought I had a very good idea of what to expect. I had very specific plans, and as I later shared with my staff as I was graduating, I basically came into that role thinking that there wasn't really a whole lot for me to learn because I thought I knew everything. But I think it was just the totality of the experience that we had that year, both the good and the bad, and particularly the bad stuff. Where, as I meant, as I mentioned, like we had drama internally. At one point, my one of my editors said that she lost faith in myself and the editor in chief as leaders because she thought that we weren't being as professional as we had hoped to be. And I think just there's nothing quite like there's no humbling quite like someone telling you that they don't trust you anymore, they that you failed them as a leader. And I think looking back at it, it affected me pretty bad. It affected me pretty badly at the time, but looking back at it, I think I not looking back at it, like I understand why she said those things, and I think it just went to show that even though I had come into this role with that confidence and with uh, thinking that I knew everything, there was just so much that I just wasn't prepared for, and I think that, and it's just that humbling that I think I needed to have, and that kind of helped brace me for a lot of the other humblings that came my way after college.
All right, I'll ask my question too. Um, so you had mentioned that it was a really like stressful time when you were starting your new job, I believe at Packrim. Um, risk of deportation, like
Mhm.
starting a brand new job. Um, what were some positives that kind of motivated you to keep on going through with that new job?
Yeah. So full disc so when I first started the job, I think that was around the time that my lawyer and I had submitted the appeal to appeal the USCIS's decision. And at the time, I decided not to bring it up to my employer because I didn't want to cause a fuss over something that I didn't really know what the outcome was going to be. So they actually did not know about it until I eventually like shared my story about this is what I have been going through for the past 17 months. This is what happened recently, but I got it and I'm in a good place now. So that's when they found out. And um, I think just through that the way that I kept, it wasn't so much a positivity, but it just gave me something to cling on to. It was through it was through the friends that I had and the community in my church community who came through. And I remember around the so initially when I found out, I only told a handful of people, and eventually, and I think one day I attended like this after church gathering that had a lot of people who were in leadership and who were just involved. And I think uh, the subject was just encouraging men to be vulnerable and to just share what are some of the things that are bothering us. And uh, when event he was actually calling on every single male in that room. And when he came to me, I just lost it because I just said, "This is what I'm going through right now." And what bothers me is that uh, I have to watch people go about living their normal lives and knowing that if I got deported, will you guys all forget about me? Um, and so uh, when that happened, my pastor told me, you know, just so you know, like I'm praying for you every day, we're behind you. And just know that in the kingdom of God, you have citizenship in heaven. And that citizenship is much greater than the citizenship that you can find here or just any other country. And I think it was just, I think just focusing on that and that message being reinforced by my fellow believers, that helped me just to kind of hang on to this hope and also come to peace with, if my appeal failed, that wasn't going to be the end of my life. I If I got deported to Korea, then I'll just have to build a life in Korea. And I obviously didn't want that option, but that was something that I told myself that I was braced to do. And luckily, we won the appeal, and um, I am a citizen now. But I think just having those people there, like having these people that I trust and look up to, support me and just reinforce me with messages that I can put hope in. That helped me get through that dark time.
Thank you, June. Yeah, what I'm hearing is community is really important, and
Yes.
establishing that community in many ways, whether it's through your school, it's through the communities that you're joining outside of school, off campus. Um, thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
All right. I see it's 12:50. I wanted to open the floor for any more questions. If you have any further questions, you can, of course, unmute your mic or you can answer in the chat. But I know that some of you do have classes to attend at 1. So I just want to say thank you so much, June, for presenting. It again, it is great to hear your story, and we really appreciate you sharing it. I know I learned a lot today, and I hope students do as well, or are taking something away as well. But thank you.
Oh, thank you for for this opportunity. I hope that everyone had a good time and learned and take has something to take away.